Captain Alexandra Alex Hale adjusted the strap of her duffel bag as she stepped into the bustling mess hall at Camp Pendleton. The room smelled of coffee, fried eggs, and stale linoleum. The usual morning chaos surrounded her, Marines jostling for trays, chatter bouncing off cinderblock walls, and the clatter of utensils on metal tables. Alex kept her gaze forward, walking with measured steps that betrayed nothing of her presence. Today she wore plain PT gear, gray sweatpants, a faded black t-shirt, and her hair pulled into a neat ponytail. No rank insignia, no medals, nothing to suggest the storm beneath the calm surface. As she approached the food line, her mind wandered briefly to the debrief she would attend in an hour. Weeks of planning, months of deployments and classified missions were behind her, yet there was no time to rest. The morning seemed ordinary, the one thing she wanted after months of classified operations overseas. But life had a way of reminding you that ordinary never lasted long in a Marine base. From her right, a young Marine barreled forward, trying to squeeze past the line. PFC Rowan Briggs, barely 18, still green to the realities of military life, misread the space and shoved Alex roughly aside. "Move it, lady," he barked, laughing nervously as if to assert his dominance. Alex froze mid-step, feeling the shove reverberate through her frame. For a brief second, the room held its breath. Every Marine instinctively knew something was off. There was a presence about her, a stillness, a discipline that didn't belong to someone so casually dressed. But none of them knew who she was. Not yet. Briggs smirked, assuming he had the upper hand. Alex's hand grazed the edge of the counter, steadying herself. Her face remained calm, almost serene, but her eyes locked onto his. It was a gaze that could hold a room silent. One glance and the bravest Marines felt a flicker of unease, but Alex said nothing. The mess hall murmured. A few junior Marines glanced at each other, exchanging worried whispers. Who is that?" one asked, his voice barely audible over the din. Another shook his head, frowning. Something about her posture, the way she held herself, the controlled exhale, hinted she was no ordinary visitor. And yet she carried herself with the kind of humility that made guessing her identity impossible. SGT, Morris, a grizzled 20-year veteran, noticed the commotion. "What's going on here?" he barked, striding forward, his boots slapping against the linoleum. His eyes fell on Alex, and he saw nothing more than a young Marine with a serious expression. "You, ma'am, step aside. This isn't the place to be blocking traffic." Alex straightened slightly, her eyes flicking toward Morris. Her voice, calm and steady, finally broke the tension. "I believe I'm exactly where I need to be, Sergeant." Her tone wasn't confrontational, yet it carried weight. Every word was deliberate, measured, and authoritative, as though she were trained to speak only when necessary. Morris froze, sensing a subtle shift. There was a power in her demeanor that didn't require a rank insignia to command respect. Briggs, confused, took a step back. His smirk faltered. The room's attention sharpened, all eyes now quietly analyzing the silent drama unfolding at the breakfast line. A few Marines nudged each other, whispering, "Do you know her? She looks different." Different indeed. To those who had been deployed, the bearing of a seasoned Marine was unmistakable, and Alex's bearing screamed experience. She had led men and women through chaos, through fire, and now she walked through a room of Marines as if it were the calmest moment of her life. Briggs' confidence wavered. His earlier bravado melted into uncertainty. Sorry, ma'am," he stammered, shifting his weight awkwardly. He had made a rookie mistake, mistaking calm authority for weakness. Mistakes like this were often punished harshly, but something in Alex's silent assessment held him in place. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't threatening. She didn't need to. Her presence alone corrected the imbalance. Whispers grew louder. Marines who had seen her vaguely before, perhaps in training videos or during base briefings, began piecing things together. Her face seemed familiar. Her posture, straight, commanding, unyielding, felt impossible for someone so quietly dressed. The room's tension thickened. Utensils paused midair. The line of Marines waiting for eggs and bacon became a tableau of frozen attention. Morris, finally regaining his voice, stepped closer. "Step aside, Marine. You can't just—" He stopped short. Something in Alex's gaze, something subtle and commanding, cut through his words. Her silence spoke louder than any reprimand. It was the authority of someone who had earned respect in life-and-death situations overseas, someone who didn't need to assert it to command it. Briggs' jaw tightened. He hadn't been in combat, hadn't faced the fire and chaos that could define a person's presence, but instinctively, he recognized the wrong choice. He had shoved someone far above him in both skill and experience, and the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. At that moment, the lieutenant responsible for base operations walked in. LT Ramirez. His eyes swept the room and then he froze. Recognition flashed across his face, pale and sharp. "Captain Hale," he breathed, the words barely audible. Silence fell as if a switch had been flipped. The room, which had been tense, now teetered on disbelief. This wasn't any ordinary Marine. This was Captain Alexandra Hale, combat-hardened, decorated, and the highest-ranking Marine present in the mess hall. Briggs' face drained of color. He had just shoved a woman who had led Marines in life-threatening operations, navigated hostile territories, and earned medals for valor that he could only dream of understanding. His embarrassment was palpable. Alex, still calm, allowed him a moment of realization, letting the weight of his mistake settle. The lesson had already begun, one she didn't have to speak aloud. For the first time that morning, the room exhaled collectively. Utensils clattered, conversations hesitantly resumed, but the shift in energy was undeniable. Everyone had glimpsed authority in its purest form, unadorned by insignia or loud declaration. Briggs, humbled, took a small step back, and Alex finally continued down the line to get her breakfast, a faint, controlled smile ghosting her lips. The storm had arrived quietly, and everyone in the room would remember it. The mess hall had just begun to settle when the reality hit. Lieutenant Ramirez, standing near the door, stared at Alex Hale, his mouth slightly agape. "Captain Hale," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the low hum of breakfast chatter. Time seemed to slow. Forks paused midair, trays hovered, and even the hum of the coffee machine felt distant. Every Marine's eyes darted between Ramirez and Alex, sensing something monumental was unfolding. A buzz of curiosity rippled through the room. Alex, aware of the scrutiny, did not flinch. Her expression remained calm, professional, yet her dark eyes held an intensity that made those who dared to stare shift uncomfortably. She had walked into this situation as she always did, controlled, measured, and silent until the moment demanded speech. The young Marine she had been shoved by, PFC Rowan Briggs, now felt the full weight of his mistake pressing down on him. Briggs' laughter from earlier evaporated. His chest tightened, his palms sweaty as he realized he had just confronted one of the most decorated Marines on the base. The initial bravado that had prompted his shove now left him frozen, guilt and fear mingling in his stomach like acid. Around him, whispers turned into quiet murmurs of recognition. "Is that really her?" one Marine asked. "The captain from Bravo Company," another replied, eyes wide. The room buzzed with speculation. Stories of Alex Hale's exploits had spread across the base in whispers and admiring glances. She had led high-risk reconnaissance missions, orchestrated civilian rescues under enemy fire, and commanded platoons after senior officers were injured. Many had seen her name on commendation boards, but few had actually met her. Now, she stood in the middle of a room full of Marines, and the magnitude of her presence hit like a wave. SGT, Morris, still standing near the food line, cleared his throat nervously. His face was pale and his usual stern demeanor cracked under the weight of realization. Captain Hale," he said, his voice wavering. I didn't," he stopped, unsure how to finish. Apologies felt insufficient. For someone like Alex Hale, who had navigated deadly combat zones and led Marines through impossible scenarios, a casual shove from a rookie was almost laughably trivial. Yet here it was, an incident that demanded acknowledgement. Alex's gaze swept over the room, lingering on Briggs. She didn't need to speak loudly. Her presence was enough to make him feel exposed, humbled, and small. She had faced far greater threats than a careless junior Marine, yet the lesson remained the same. Respect was never optional. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, conveyed a silent but unmistakable message: judgment had been made, and the world was about to teach him consequences. Briggs, struggling to find words, could barely meet her gaze. I'm sorry, ma'am," he stammered. His voice cracked with nervousness. The words felt insufficient, a mere whisper against the force of Alex's presence. The murmurs around the room grew louder as other Marines began connecting the dots. The one they had assumed to be an ordinary, perhaps even insignificant, Marine was in fact the highest-ranking officer present. Lt. Ramirez stepped forward, still visibly shocked. His usual authoritative composure faltered as he tried to reconcile the calm, unassuming woman in PT gear with the decorated officer he had only ever known in formal briefs and debriefings. "Captain Hale," he said carefully, his voice now firm but tinged with awe, "we weren't expecting you here." "I mean," he trailed off, realizing no words could capture the gravity of the situation. Alex inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than arrogance. Her silence carried authority in a way that words never could. In that moment the room understood something profound. Leadership was not always loud. True authority was felt, not declared. The Marines who had once judged her for appearance alone now felt the weight of unspoken power. Briggs' stomach churned. He had thought he was asserting control, but the real lesson was about humility, about recognizing strength where it might not be obvious. Whispers swept through the mess hall. "Isn't that Captain Hale who led the extraction in Kandahar?" one asked. "The one who saved those civilians during the firefight," another replied. A group of senior enlisted Marines exchanged uneasy glances. They had all read the mission reports, all seen her commendations, and now they were watching her live, calm, composed, and entirely in control of a situation that could have escalated into chaos. The other officers in the room, previously oblivious, began to step forward cautiously. They had witnessed Alex's approach to leadership before, but never up close. They understood now why her Marines had followed her without hesitation in the field, why subordinates trusted her judgment implicitly. Even SGT. Morris, who had initially assumed the role of disciplinarian, now felt the weight of her experience pressing on him. Briggs, meanwhile, sank lower in his chair, shame and awe battling within him. He had only meant to push someone out of his way, to assert himself like a typical young Marine, but the reality was far more humbling. He had bumped against history, someone who had literally walked through fire and led others through impossible circumstances. And now he faced her, silent, patient, and entirely aware of the lesson she was imparting without saying a word. Alex finally spoke, her voice quiet but perfectly measured. "The line moves quickly here in the mornings," she said. "I suggest we all remember to look where we're going." Her tone was calm, yet it carried an edge that cut through any remaining tension. No one laughed. No one scoffed. Even Briggs couldn't meet her gaze, swallowing hard as the implications sank in. Lt. Ramirez finally regained his composure. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice firm but reverent. "Of course, ma'am." He gestured toward the food line, giving Alex the space she deserved. The room slowly exhaled, though the energy remained charged. Respect had been established, not through intimidation or threat, but through presence, composure, and undeniable authority. As Alex moved through the line to get her breakfast, Marines whispered among themselves, comparing notes and stories. Tales of her missions, leadership, and tactical genius flowed quietly through the mess hall. Some Marines, previously dismissive of the incident, now sat upright, keenly aware that the woman they had misjudged was someone they would follow anywhere. Briggs remained frozen, his mind spinning with the enormity of the lesson he had just received. By the time Alex reached the end of the line, the room had settled into a careful rhythm. Conversations were hushed, glances frequent. Everyone knew that something extraordinary had occurred. A single shove, a single misjudged action had revealed not just a leader's identity, but the subtle, commanding force that true authority wielded. In a place designed for meals and mundane chatter, the mess hall had become a classroom, and the lesson was unforgettable. Even as Alex sat at a table, tray in hand, she did not relax. Her eyes swept the room, noting behavior, posture, and attitude. She had seen more chaos than any mess hall could hold, yet this incident, seemingly minor, had the potential to shape a Marine's career and character. Briggs met her gaze briefly, and for the first time, understanding flickered in his eyes. The lesson was clear. Appearances deceive, authority commands quietly, and every action, even a shove in the breakfast line, carries weight. By the end of the meal, the buzz of excitement had spread beyond the mess hall. Word of the encounter would travel through the base, whispered at first, then more confidently as Marines recounted the moment. Alex had arrived, unseen, misjudged, and yet had left an indelible mark. Not because she raised her voice or demanded compliance, but because she was Captain Alexandra Hale, and in the Marine Corps, everyone knew what that meant. The room would remember the shove forever. But more importantly, they would remember the woman who transformed a simple act of disrespect into a lesson of authority, discipline, and respect that none of them would ever forget. The mess hall buzzed with quiet tension as Alex Hale moved through the room, tray in hand. Her calm, steady presence created an almost magnetic pull. Conversations hushed, and even the youngest Marines instinctively straightened their posture. Eyes followed her, lingering, trying to reconcile the casual PT attire with the aura of authority radiating from her every movement. For some, the contrast was jarring. For others, instinctively familiar. Alex's reputation preceded her, though most had only heard the stories, and now they were witnessing the woman behind the legend. Briggs, still frozen near the edge of the breakfast line, barely breathed. He felt small, unworthy, and foolish all at once. The shove he had delivered, meant as a minor assertion of dominance, had become a moment of reckoning. One glance from her and he knew he was outmatched not by rank alone, but by experience, composure, and sheer presence. Every fiber of his being recognized that he had just encountered a force far beyond his understanding. Lt. Ramirez, the first officer to recognize her, began to gather the courage to address the room. "Marines," he said, his voice slightly trembling but firm, "I believe you all now understand who stands before you. This is Captain Alexandra Hale." The words caused a ripple of disbelief. Eyes widened, jaws slackened, and whispers spread like wildfire. Names were exchanged. "Hale, as in the Bravo Company Hale," one Marine murmured. She led the Kandahar operation," another whispered. "SGT." Morris, still standing near the line, felt a flush of embarrassment. He had assumed control, ready to correct what he thought was a minor incident. Now he realized that even his years of experience paled in comparison to the depth of command Alex possessed. He opened his mouth to apologize, but Alex's eyes briefly met his and he froze. No words were needed. Discipline, respect, and authority flowed from her presence alone, demanding acknowledgement without force. The stories began to circulate aloud, cautiously at first. Marines recalled briefings, commendation boards, and mission reports. They spoke of her leadership during high-risk operations, her ability to extract civilians from combat zones under fire, and the time she had taken command after senior officers were injured or incapacitated. Each tale heightened the sense of awe, leaving Briggs and others grappling with the enormity of their earlier misjudgment. Alex did not interject. She allowed her record to speak for her. Briggs, his face pale, took a hesitant step backward. He had thought the morning would be ordinary, a chance to eat quickly and head out to training. Instead, he had collided with history, and it had looked him squarely in the eyes. The realization hit him with the force of a tactical strike. He had confronted someone who had navigated hostile territories, commanded Marines under fire, and earned medals for valor that many officers could only dream of. And now, in the relative calm of the mess hall, he was facing her judgment, silent, precise, and impossible to deflect. The senior enlisted Marines who had witnessed the incident shifted uneasily in their seats. Many had served alongside Alex in joint exercises or had been briefed on her operations overseas. They knew firsthand that she was not just competent, she was extraordinary. They recalled her calm decisiveness under fire, her ability to motivate and command respect, and her reputation for turning chaotic missions into controlled, successful outcomes. Yet here, in casual attire, she had rendered every assumption in the mess hall meaningless. Lt. Ramirez stepped closer to Alex, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Captain, I didn't expect," his words faltered. He had known of her reputation but had never seen it manifest in such a quiet, controlled, and commanding way. Alex's reply was subtle, almost a whisper. "I handle situations as they come, Lieutenant. This one required patience, observation, and clarity." Her tone carried weight without raising decibels, and he felt the truth of her words settle heavily in the room. Briggs finally spoke, his voice a mixture of shame and awe. I didn't know, ma'am," he admitted, his eyes dropping to the floor. The room went silent. There was no excuse that could rectify what he had done, and Alex did not need one. She had faced far more serious errors and misjudgments in her career, ones that had life-or-death consequences. Yet in this moment she offered an unspoken opportunity, acknowledgement, correction, and the possibility of growth. The other Marines leaned in, curious and attentive. They had all witnessed the power of rank and reputation before, but this was different. Alex's authority did not demand compliance. It drew attention, respect, and awareness naturally. Her calm control, her measured movements, and the subtle command in her gaze conveyed lessons far deeper than any lecture could. Every Marine in that mess hall was learning, observing, and recalibrating their understanding of leadership. "SGT, Morris, humbled, finally spoke, his voice steadier but respectful. "Captain Hale, it seems the line and our perception moved faster than expected." His attempt at humor fell short, but Alex allowed a small nod, acknowledging his effort while subtly reinforcing her control over the moment. The shift in energy was palpable. Marines who had been casual, dismissive, or inattentive were now alert, present, and fully engaged with her presence. Briggs, trembling slightly, attempted to apologize again. I didn't mean to, Alex's gaze softened marginally, enough to allow him recognition of his error without embarrassment becoming humiliation. She did not scold him. She did not belabor the point. Her silence, her measured stance, and her authority conveyed the lesson with far more impact than any verbal reprimand could have. For Briggs, the moment was transformative, a lesson in humility, respect, and awareness that would stay with him long after breakfast was over. Word of her identity spread rapidly through the room. Stories of her overseas missions, commendations, and leadership began to circulate audibly. Marines who had initially been distracted, whispering, or glancing away were now fully present. The room became a hive of quiet reverence. They realized that the Marine they had misjudged, the one they thought was an ordinary visitor in PT gear, was the same Captain Hale whose operational brilliance had become the stuff of base legend. Briggs finally lowered his eyes, swallowing hard. He had collided with a living embodiment of excellence, discipline, and authority. And yet Alex's approach offered a subtle promise, recognition of error, a path toward growth, and an example of true leadership. She had revealed herself not through words or threats but through presence, bearing, and quiet command. Every Marine in that mess hall, from the youngest recruit to the seasoned sergeant, had absorbed the lesson. By the time Alex sat at a table, tray in hand, the room had begun to return to its rhythm. Yet the energy was irrevocably changed. The respect she commanded did not need to be vocalized. It was visible in every posture, every glance, and every whispered comment. Even Briggs, though humbled and nervous, felt a flicker of inspiration. He had witnessed firsthand how a single individual could shape the environment around them, not through fear or intimidation, but through quiet confidence, experience, and presence. The lesson was clear. Appearances could be deceiving, authority could be silent, and respect was earned, not demanded. Alex had arrived, seemingly unnoticed, misjudged, and underestimated, and yet she had left an indelible mark on everyone in the mess hall. Briggs, SGT. Morris and the others would remember this morning forever, not for the shove that began it, but for the woman who transformed a fleeting act of disrespect into a profound lesson in leadership, poise, and earned respect. After breakfast, the mess hall slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the energy lingered, charged with the memory of Captain Alexandra Hale's presence. Marines quietly exchanged glances, whispering stories of her overseas exploits and trying to piece together the sheer force of her authority. Yet for Alex, the incident with PFC Rowan Briggs was far from over. It wasn't about the shove or the embarrassment. It was about the potential she saw in him. She had been young once, brash, eager to prove herself in ways that often landed her in trouble. She knew that a Marine like Briggs could be molded, guided, and ultimately transformed. Later that morning, she requested a private meeting with Briggs. The young Marine, still pale from the earlier incident, followed her to a quiet corner of the base, unsure of what awaited him. He expected anger, maybe even punishment, the kind that left a permanent mark. Instead, Alex's demeanor was calm, professional, and surprisingly patient. She gestured for him to sit across from her, and he hesitated, nervous, shifting from foot to foot. "PFC Briggs," Alex began, her voice steady, deliberate, and commanding without needing to shout. "I want to understand you." Briggs blinked in confusion. "Understand me, ma'am." "Yes," she replied, her eyes unwavering. "You shoved me this morning. Most Marines would face a reprimand, maybe even physical correction. But I don't believe in that approach. I believe in potential. I want to understand why you acted the way you did." He swallowed hard. He had never had a superior officer speak to him like this, not just asking for compliance, but genuinely seeking to understand him. I guess I was trying to, I don't know, assert myself. Show I could," he stopped, realizing the words sounded feeble under her gaze. Alex nodded slowly, listening without interrupting. Her silence was intentional. It forced him to confront his own reasoning, to dig deeper into the impulses and frustrations that drove his behavior. "You're green," she said finally, not as an insult but as an observation. "You're trying to find your place. You're unsure how to handle stress, frustration, or unfamiliar authority. That's normal for someone at your stage." Briggs' shoulders slumped slightly. He had expected punishment, not understanding. A strange mixture of relief and guilt washed over him. Alex's eyes softened fractionally, enough to convey empathy, but they remained sharp, precise, and commanding. "You need guidance, Briggs. You need someone who can teach you how to act under pressure, how to anticipate challenges, and how to lead even when you're uncertain. That's what I can offer. Not because I'm your superior, but because I've been where you are and I've learned what works." He nodded slowly, trying to absorb her words. The anger and bravado that had prompted the shove that morning were replaced by self-awareness and nervous curiosity. Alex leaned back slightly, still calm, still observing, still commanding. "Your behavior today wasn't catastrophic," she continued. "It was a misstep, but how you respond now, how you learn from it, will define you far more than the shove itself." Briggs blinked. He had never heard anyone in the Marine Corps speak with this combination of authority, patience, and insight. Most officers had barked orders, reprimanded, or lectured. Alex's approach was different. She was dissecting his behavior, helping him recognize patterns, flaws, and opportunities for growth. And she was doing it without humiliation. "Captain Hale," he said cautiously, why are you doing this? I mean, I embarrassed myself in front of everyone. You could have." "I could have punished you," she interrupted softly, "or made an example, but the lesson would have ended at shame. That doesn't build Marines, it only breeds resentment. I want you to grow. I want you to understand what leadership really is and what it means to carry responsibility for yourself and those around you." Briggs shifted in his seat. He had heard about mentorship in theory, but he had never experienced it firsthand. He had assumed authority was something you obeyed, not something you were taught to understand. Alex's approach was making him uncomfortable, but in a productive way. It was forcing him to see himself clearly, to confront his weaknesses, and to recognize the strength he could develop. "Do you know why I didn't react aggressively to your shove this morning?" Alex asked, her voice steady. Briggs shook his head. "Because respect is earned, not assumed. I've led Marines in situations where a wrong move could cost lives. I've been tested under fire, in chaos, and under pressure. You Briggs have never faced anything like that. Yet in this simple moment, you have the opportunity to learn how to act with awareness, not impulse. That lesson is far more valuable than any punishment I could give. The words hit him harder than any reprimand ever could. He felt exposed, vulnerable, yet understood in a way that instilled curiosity and a sense of possibility. Alex was not merely scolding him. She was teaching, guiding, and challenging him simultaneously. She leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on his. Briggs, the world will test you in ways you can't predict. You will make mistakes. You will face chaos and uncertainty. How you respond, whether with discipline, awareness, and composure, or with impulsive anger, will define your trajectory. I am offering you a chance to practice the first path. Briggs nodded again, swallowing hard. I understand, ma'am. I think I understand. Alex allowed a brief, approving nod, then added, Good, that's the start. This morning was not your failure, it was your opportunity. Most people never recognize those moments. You have. Now we will act on it. Over the next hour, Alex asked him questions, probing his thought processes, his reactions to stress, and his approach to authority. Each question was deliberate, designed to make him think critically and reflect honestly. Briggs realized he was being assessed, not judged. His initial embarrassment transformed into engagement. He found himself speaking openly, analyzing his own missteps for the first time in his military career. By the end of the session, Briggs felt a subtle but profound shift. The fear and shame that had weighed him down that morning were replaced by understanding and a sense of purpose. He began to recognize the lessons embedded in the shove, the silence, and Alex's calm authority. She had not humiliated him. She had illuminated his path forward. Alex concluded the meeting with a final word, her tone firm yet encouraging. Briggs, growth is earned. Authority is respected. Strength is disciplined. Remember this moment not for the mistake but for the lesson. You have the potential to become a Marine who leads others, not just follows orders. That is your choice every day, starting now. Briggs stood, his posture straighter than when he arrived. He saluted, and for the first time he felt a genuine sense of clarity and purpose. Yes, ma'am, he said, his voice steady, carrying weight beyond his years. As he walked away, Alex observed silently, her eyes scanning the mess hall, now quiet with curiosity and reflection. She knew the ripple effects of this encounter would extend far beyond Briggs alone. Today, she had done more than address a shove. She had begun shaping a Marine, a leader, and that impact would echo through the base for weeks to come. In that moment, she understood something she had known for years. Leadership was not defined by rank alone, medals, or authority. It was defined by the ability to see potential, guide it, and turn mistakes into lessons that could shape a person's life. Briggs was the first, but not the last, to experience that quiet, transformative force. The morning sunlight streamed through the mess hall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Alex Hale remained seated at her table, calm, composed, and entirely in command. Outside, Marines moved through their routines, unaware of the full impact of the encounter they had witnessed. Inside, the seeds of leadership had been sown, quietly, powerfully, and irrevocably. The next morning, PFC Rowan Briggs arrived at the training field before dawn, the air sharp and cold against his face. He had been ordered to report to Captain Alexandra Hale at 500 hours. Expecting a punishment session, push-ups, drills, reprimands, he braced himself. Instead, the field was quiet, lined with cones, obstacle courses, and a single figure standing tall, Alex Hale. Her PT uniform was crisp, and her posture radiated authority. She didn't speak immediately. She simply observed him, the early sunlight catching the sharp lines of her face, revealing focus honed by countless missions overseas. Briggs swallowed hard. The nerves and shame from the mess hall incident churned in his stomach. He felt small, unworthy, and exposed, yet there was something magnetic about her presence. He straightened instinctively, feeling the weight of her attention. Alex Hale didn't need to raise her voice to command obedience. Her very posture, the tilt of her head, and the calm in her gaze were enough. "Rowan Briggs," she said finally, her voice calm, controlled, and deliberate. "Today is not about punishment. Today is about understanding. Do you want to grow as a Marine, or do you want to remain like this?" She gestured subtly at his slouched shoulders, nervous hands, and distracted eyes. Briggs' throat went dry. I want to grow, ma'am," he replied, his voice tentative but sincere. "Good," she said, nodding once. "Then follow instructions carefully, focus on your movements, and listen with intent. We start with observation. You will not act impulsively. You will think before you move. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, trying to project confidence. The training began with a series of tactical drills, each one designed to test awareness, decision-making, and composure. Alex instructed Briggs through simulated scenarios, navigating obstacles blindfolded, identifying threats while under time pressure, and making split-second decisions in simulated combat situations. Every exercise was deliberately structured to expose his weaknesses, but also to demonstrate how discipline, focus, and controlled action could overcome mistakes. Briggs' initial attempts were clumsy. He tripped over obstacles, misread instructions, and panicked under simulated stress. Each time, Alex's gaze met his steady, unflinching, and exacting. "Focus, Briggs," she said calmly. "Control your fear. Think before you act. A Marine is defined by what he does in chaos, not what chaos does to him." Her words were sharp but measured, cutting through the fog of his self-doubt. Hours passed. Sweat poured down Briggs' face, muscles burned, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The physical exertion was grueling, yet Alex maintained a relentless mental pressure. She interjected questions mid-drill, forcing him to analyze every decision. "Why did you choose that route? What alternative did you have? How would this choice affect your team in real combat?" Each question exposed flaws, yet simultaneously offered a path to correction. By midday, a subtle shift occurred. Briggs' movements became more deliberate, his breathing steadier, his reactions more controlled. Alex noticed, her keen eyes tracking every improvement. She nodded once, a tiny sign of approval, then pushed him further, introducing scenarios that required leadership, observation, and adaptation. Briggs was being tested not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, challenged to embody the discipline, awareness, and poise that defined Alex Hale herself. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Where earlier he had reacted impulsively, now he paused, assessed, and executed. Where fear had ruled, now focus guided him. Alex corrected mistakes with clarity, never anger, reinforcing lessons through demonstration rather than punishment. By late afternoon, Briggs was exhausted, but a new understanding had taken root. He could feel the shift within himself, confidence tempered with awareness, strength guided by discipline. Alex allowed a brief moment of rest. "Rowan," she said, voice calm but commanding, "today is just the beginning. Leadership is earned through action, reflection, and persistence. You've made mistakes, we all do. The difference is whether you learn from them. Are you ready to keep learning?" Briggs nodded, breathless but resolute. "Yes, ma'am, I am." The final exercise of the day simulated a high-stakes rescue operation. Briggs had to navigate the obstacle course under pressure, coordinating with imaginary team members while making rapid tactical decisions. Every step demanded focus, awareness, and composure, the exact skills Alex had honed in countless deployments. Briggs stumbled at first, but each mistake was immediately corrected by her subtle guidance, her calm voice cutting through the chaos. "Adjust your pace. Observe before you act. Protect your team. Anticipate the environment." Hours of grueling training, reflection, and observation culminated in a single moment where Briggs executed the exercise flawlessly. He moved with precision, reacting with clarity and composure under the simulated stress. Alex watched quietly, her face revealing a rare but genuine hint of approval. For Briggs, the moment was transformative. He realized that the lessons he had learned were far more valuable than punishment or embarrassment. They were the foundation of leadership, resilience, and self-respect. By evening, as they walked back to the barracks, Briggs felt a profound change within himself. The fear, shame, and confusion of the morning had given way to clarity, purpose, and a tentative confidence. Alex's mentorship had not only corrected his behavior but awakened potential he had never recognized. He understood now that leadership was not about asserting dominance, but about discipline, awareness, and guiding others through example. Alex spoke quietly as they walked. "Remember, Briggs, every action has consequences, every mistake has a lesson, and every decision shapes who you become. Today you learned more than drills. You learned yourself. Carry this forward. The Marine Corps, your team, and your own future depend on it." Briggs nodded, swallowing hard. I understand, ma'am. I won't forget this." Alex gave a small, approving nod, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Good. That's the first step. There are many more to come. Today was about understanding discipline and control. Tomorrow will be about applying it." As they approached the barracks, Briggs felt a sense of pride he had never experienced before. Exhaustion mixed with exhilaration. He had confronted his weaknesses, faced rigorous training, and emerged not just corrected but transformed. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be a Marine in the fullest sense: disciplined, aware, and prepared to lead. Alex Hale, walking beside him, reflected silently. She had transformed not just a moment of disrespect in the mess hall into a lesson, but a young Marine into someone with the potential to inspire and lead others. That was the essence of leadership, she knew. Not authority alone, but the ability to see potential and nurture it. Briggs' journey had only begun, yet the seed of transformation had been planted. The sun set over the base, casting long shadows across the training field. For Briggs, the day had been exhausting, humbling, and awakening. For Alex, it had been another step in the endless task of shaping Marines into leaders, not through fear, punishment, or ego, but through guidance, discipline, and unwavering example. By the time darkness settled, both knew that the shove in the mess hall had become something far greater, the start of a transformation that neither would forget. By the next morning, word of Captain Alexandra Hale's encounter with PFC Rowan Briggs had already begun to circulate across the base. Marines whispered in hallways, in barracks, and even in the training grounds. What had started as a simple shove in the mess hall had transformed into a legend in waiting, a demonstration of authority, composure, and mentorship that no one would soon forget. Alex's quiet handling of the situation had captured attention, and her reputation spread faster than she could have imagined. Briggs, walking through the base with slightly taller shoulders and a newfound sense of awareness, realized that the transformation in himself was mirrored by the way others now viewed him. His peers no longer saw just a young, impulsive recruit. They noticed the changes in his movements, the steadiness in his gaze, and the attentiveness in his posture. The lessons Alex had imparted were not confined to the training field. They radiated outward, influencing the perceptions of every Marine he passed. The mess hall, previously a site of casual chatter and routine breakfasts, had become a symbol of Alex's leadership style. Marines recalled how she had handled the morning incident, not with anger, not with punishment, but with calm authority and quiet command. The story of the shove was retold repeatedly, each recounting highlighting her discipline, presence, and unwavering composure. Even junior Marines who had been unaware of her record felt a ripple of awe and respect. Sergeant Morris, who had been one of the first to recognize her authority, noticed the shift immediately. He observed the younger Marines moving with more attention, speaking with more consideration, and listening more intently to instructions. Alex's influence was subtle but undeniable. Where once there had been chaos, now there was focus. Where once there had been casual disregard, now there was awareness. Her example had become a silent standard for behavior across the base. Word reached the senior officers as well. Lieutenant Ramirez, still amazed by the morning's events, briefed other commanding officers about the encounter. They were impressed not just by Alex's record, which they knew of, but by her ability to command respect and teach lessons without resorting to authority alone. Many reflected on their own leadership styles and found themselves wondering how often they missed opportunities to mentor rather than discipline. Alex had demonstrated a principle that transcended rank. True leadership inspires, it doesn't intimidate. Back at the training field, Alex continued her work with Briggs, introducing more advanced exercises that tested not only his physical endurance, but his ability to think under pressure. Each task was carefully designed to reinforce the lessons of observation, composure, and discipline. Other Marines, hearing of the sessions, began to watch from a distance, curious and intrigued. They had witnessed the initial shove, they had heard the whispers of her record, and now they wanted to see the captain in action. Briggs' progress was remarkable. Tasks that had once seemed impossible became manageable as he applied Alex's principles. He learned to anticipate problems, analyze situations critically, and execute decisions with precision. What had begun as punishment, or at least what he had feared as punishment, had become an opportunity for growth. Alex had not only corrected his behavior but also instilled a sense of confidence, self-respect, and responsibility. The transformation was visible, and those observing could see it clearly. As the week progressed, the influence of Alex's mentorship began to ripple further. Marines who had previously dismissed her as just another officer began to approach her for advice, seeking guidance on both leadership and personal development. Junior recruits, inspired by her calm authority, adjusted their behavior, striving to emulate her discipline and composure. Even senior Marines, impressed by the effectiveness of her approach, found themselves reassessing their own methods. Alex had set a new standard for what leadership could be: quiet, deliberate, and profoundly impactful. Briggs, meanwhile, embraced his role as a transformed Marine. He took the lessons he had learned from Alex and began to mentor other recruits, passing on the principles of observation, patience, and disciplined action. His confidence grew, not from arrogance, but from understanding of himself, of responsibility, and of what it meant to lead and support others. Marines who had once overlooked him now respected his judgment, and he began to emerge as a quiet but influential figure among his peers. One morning, as Alex observed the training field from a distance, she noticed the subtle shifts occurring around her. Marines were moving with greater awareness, communicating more effectively, and showing respect not because they were afraid, but because they recognized competence and integrity. Briggs executed drills flawlessly, correcting minor mistakes with thoughtful reflection rather than impulsive reaction. The ripples of influence that began with a single shove were now spreading through the ranks, transforming not just one Marine, but the culture of the unit itself. Even in the mess hall, the shift was evident. Conversations were more focused, movements more precise, and a quiet attentiveness had replaced casual disregard. Marines who had once viewed the morning incident as trivial now recognized it as a lesson in leadership, respect, and personal growth. The story of Alex Hale, the captain who turned a simple shove into an opportunity for transformation, became a living example of the power of mentorship and the subtle, profound influence of presence. Alex understood the significance of this transformation. She knew that shaping Marines required patience, observation, and strategic guidance. She had turned a potential conflict into an educational moment, demonstrating that leadership was about more than rank, medals, or authority. It was about vision, mentorship, and the ability to see potential where others saw only mistakes. By guiding Briggs and allowing the ripple effects to spread naturally, she had amplified her influence beyond any formal command structure. By the end of the week, the base had changed subtly but unmistakably. Marines moved with increased awareness, exercises were executed with greater precision, and the culture of respect and attentiveness had strengthened. Briggs had emerged as a competent, confident, and observant Marine, while Alex had silently reinforced her presence as a transformative leader. The lesson of the shove, once an embarrassing moment for a young recruit, had become a foundational example of leadership in action, inspiring not just one Marine, but an entire unit. As the sun set over the training grounds, Alex Hale watched her Marines with satisfaction. The mess hall incident, once trivial and potentially humiliating, had evolved into a story of growth, mentorship, and transformation. Briggs, now walking confidently alongside his peers, exemplified the lessons she had imparted: discipline, awareness, and composure under pressure. And across the base, Marines continued to absorb and apply the principles she had demonstrated so effortlessly. The ripple effect of her presence was unmistakable. Respect, discipline, and mentorship had spread, quietly but powerfully, transforming not just behavior but mindset. Alex had proven that true leadership was not about authority alone. It was about vision, guidance, and the ability to see and nurture potential. From a simple shove in the mess hall to a base-wide cultural shift, her impact had been profound, enduring, and undeniable. Weeks had passed since the infamous shove in the mess hall, but the memory of that morning remained vivid for PFC Rowan Briggs. What had begun as a moment of humiliation had evolved into a journey of growth, discipline, and self-awareness, guided by Captain Alexandra Hale. Each day under her watchful eye had reinforced lessons in leadership, composure, and awareness. Briggs was no longer just a young, impulsive Marine. He was becoming someone capable of influencing others, a testament to Alex's mentorship. Morning drills began as usual, but Briggs approached them with a different mindset. He moved with purpose, anticipating potential mistakes before they happened. Where once he would have reacted impulsively, now he paused, observed, and acted deliberately. His confidence grew with every decision, tempered by the awareness that true strength came from control, not brute force. The Marines around him noticed the difference immediately. His posture was straighter, his eyes sharper, and his presence quietly commanding. During obstacle courses and tactical simulations, Briggs executed exercises flawlessly, incorporating strategies Alex had taught him. He learned not only to lead himself, but also to guide his peers, offering subtle advice and encouragement where needed. The young Marines who had once doubted his abilities now turned to him for guidance, inspired by his calm decisiveness and measured actions. It was a remarkable transformation, one that mirrored the lessons Alex had instilled: observation, patience, and disciplined execution. One afternoon, during a particularly grueling combat simulation, Briggs faced a critical decision. The scenario demanded he lead a small team to extract a simulated high-value target while under pressure and with limited resources. In the past, he would have panicked, relying on instinct rather than strategy. But now he paused, assessing the environment, considering contingencies, and coordinating with his team. "Move to cover, maintain visual on the objective," he instructed, his voice steady. "Lieutenant, flank left, corporal, provide overwatch. I'll navigate the extraction route. Communicate continuously." His teammates followed without hesitation. Briggs' orders were clear, concise, and confident. The difference was stark. Where he once would have stumbled, hesitated, and caused confusion, now he was decisive, authoritative, and precise. Under pressure, he demonstrated not just competence but leadership that inspired trust. Alex observed from a distance, her expression calm but approving. She had guided him to this point, but she understood that true leadership revealed itself under challenge, not in controlled instruction. Briggs' ability to synthesize lessons, make calculated decisions, and influence his team reflected the depth of transformation she had instilled. After the successful exercise, Briggs gathered the team, debriefing them with insight and clarity. He acknowledged their efforts, analyzed what worked, and discussed potential improvements. The team, inspired by his composure and knowledge, absorbed every word. Alex approached silently, observing the interaction. For Briggs, the growth was tangible. He was no longer a passive recipient of instruction. He had become an active leader, capable of shaping outcomes and influencing those around him. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Senior officers, watching the training, began to recognize Briggs as an emerging leader. They saw the effects of Alex's mentorship manifest in both his decisions and the respect he commanded from peers. Marines who had initially mocked or dismissed him now sought his guidance, eager to learn from his experiences and the discipline he embodied. The shift in perception was profound, extending far beyond the mess hall incident that had started it all. Briggs himself reflected on the journey. The humiliation, the training, the mentorship, every moment had contributed to a fundamental change in his character. He had learned to control his impulses, to analyze situations critically, and to prioritize the well-being of his team above ego. Each lesson from Alex had been reinforced through practice, observation, and reflection. He realized that leadership was not about rank or recognition, but about responsibility, awareness, and the ability to influence others positively. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Briggs approached Alex. "Ma'am," he began, his voice steady, I understand now. The shove, the training, the lessons, I see what you were teaching me. It wasn't about punishment, it was about growth, about becoming a Marine who can lead, not just follow." Alex regarded him silently for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Exactly, Briggs. Leadership is earned through action, reflection, and consistency. You've shown growth, not just in skill, but in awareness and composure. That is what makes a Marine truly capable of guiding others." The words resonated deeply with Briggs. For the first time, he felt a sense of accomplishment that was not tied to praise or reward, but to personal transformation. He understood the responsibility that came with leadership, the weight of decisions, the need for patience, and the power of example. And he knew that this journey was ongoing. Each day would present new challenges, requiring him to apply lessons, adapt, and continue growing. As weeks turned into months, Briggs continued to demonstrate leadership qualities in every aspect of his service. He guided junior Marines with clarity and patience, mediated conflicts with calm authority, and led exercises with confidence and precision. The respect he earned was genuine, rooted in competence, integrity, and the trust he inspired. His peers no longer saw him as the Marine who had shoved a superior officer in the mess hall. They saw him as a capable leader, someone shaped by experience, mentorship, and disciplined growth. Alex watched silently, proud but unobtrusive. Her role had been to guide, observe, and challenge. The transformation was complete not because of her commands, but because of the lessons she had imparted and the environment she had cultivated. Briggs had taken responsibility for his actions, embraced mentorship, and applied principles of leadership that would serve him for the rest of his career. The mess hall incident, which had once seemed trivial and embarrassing, had become the catalyst for a profound transformation. It had set in motion a chain of events that reshaped not only Briggs but also influenced the broader culture of the unit. Marines observed the change, internalized the lessons, and began to emulate the qualities Alex had demonstrated: discipline, awareness, composure, and mentorship. One day, during a group briefing, Briggs was asked to lead a scenario involving complex tactical decisions. He took command with confidence, delegating tasks, analyzing potential threats, and coordinating his team with clarity. Senior officers watched closely, impressed by the precision, composure, and authority he displayed. Alex, present but silent, observed with satisfaction. The Marine who had once impulsively shoved a superior officer had become a leader in his own right, embodying the principles she had instilled. By the end of the exercise, Briggs had earned not only the respect of his peers, but also the recognition of the senior leadership. His growth was visible, undeniable, and inspiring. Marines spoke of the transformation, recounting the lessons learned from both Alex and Briggs, and the story of the shove that became a teaching moment spread further, reinforcing the principles of mentorship, discipline, and respect across the base. In private, Alex approached Briggs, her expression calm but approving. "Rowan," she said, "you've shown growth, resilience, and leadership. The journey doesn't end here, but today you've proven you can lead, inspire, and guide others. Remember this moment and continue to build on it." Briggs nodded, understanding fully. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't forget this. I'll continue to lead just like you've taught me." Alex smiled faintly. Good. That is what it means to be a Marine, to learn, to grow, and to carry forward the lessons that shape you into someone capable of guiding others. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the base, Briggs walked with confidence, no longer the nervous recruit but a rising leader. The transformation was complete. The Marine who had shoved a superior officer had become someone who others would follow willingly, inspired by discipline, composure, and example. And in that quiet, powerful transformation, the legacy of Captain Alexandra Hale's leadership was fully realized. Months had passed since the infamous morning in the mess hall, and the story of Captain Alexandra Hale and PFC Rowan Briggs had become something of a legend on the base. What had started as a minor incident, a shove, a moment of impulsive disrespect, had transformed into a profound example of leadership, mentorship, and the quiet power of presence. Marines across the base had observed, absorbed, and applied the lessons, each one leaving an indelible mark on the culture. Briggs, now a fully transformed Marine, moved through the base with confidence and awareness. He carried himself differently, shoulders squared, gaze steady, and posture radiating quiet authority. His peers looked to him for guidance, not because he demanded it, but because he embodied the principles Alex had instilled: discipline, composure, and the ability to lead without arrogance. He had become the embodiment of what mentorship could achieve, a living testament to the power of guidance, patience, and example. The mess hall, once a place of casual chatter and routine meals, had evolved into a symbol of discipline and attentiveness. Marines now approached their routines with focus and awareness, inspired by the story of Alex Hale and the transformation of Briggs. Conversations were more thoughtful, movements more deliberate, and respect, both for peers and leadership, had become ingrained in the daily rhythm of life on base. The impact of a single act, handled correctly, had rippled through the ranks, altering behavior and culture in ways that formal orders could never have achieved. Alex herself continued her work quietly but deliberately. She observed, mentored, and guided, understanding that leadership was less about commands and more about shaping the environment, influencing behavior, and inspiring growth. Her interventions were subtle yet profound. A quiet word here, a corrective action there, and her presence alone was enough to transform hesitation into confidence, impulsiveness into discipline, and doubt into determination. Briggs often reflected on how far he had come. He remembered the initial shove, the confusion, and the embarrassment he had felt that morning. He remembered Alex's calm, unwavering gaze and her deliberate decision to teach rather than punish. Every lesson she imparted on discipline, observation, composure, and leadership had become part of his identity. He realized that the true test of a Marine wasn't physical endurance or battlefield skill alone. It was the ability to control oneself, guide others, and act with awareness and integrity. One afternoon, during a leadership exercise, Briggs was tasked with guiding a squad through a complex tactical scenario. His instructions were clear, concise, and deliberate. He anticipated errors, corrected missteps with patience, and maintained calm under pressure. The squad moved efficiently, their respect for him evident in every action. Alex watched silently from a distance, her presence a subtle reminder of the lessons that had shaped him. After the exercise, the squad debriefed, and Briggs spoke with insight and humility. He highlighted what worked, acknowledged mistakes, and offered guidance for improvement. The younger Marines listened intently, absorbing not just tactical advice but lessons in leadership, presence, and accountability. Briggs had transformed from a student into a teacher, passing on the principles that had reshaped him, and in doing so, reinforcing Alex's legacy across the base. Senior officers took notice as well. They observed the subtle shifts in culture, Marines demonstrating more awareness, responding to challenges with calm composure, and leading one another with respect and insight. Alex's influence, once confined to individual mentorship, had become systemic. She had created a ripple effect that extended far beyond the initial incident, proving that leadership was less about rank and more about the ability to shape, inspire, and guide. Briggs' growth inspired others. Recruits who had previously felt uncertain about their place now approached him for guidance. Peers who had doubted him respected his judgment. Even seasoned Marines sought his perspective. The lessons Alex had taught him, patience, observation, composure, and disciplined action, were now being shared organically, expanding her influence beyond her direct mentorship. Briggs had become a conduit for her philosophy, a living example of what could happen when leadership was exercised with integrity and vision. The mess hall incident, once a source of embarrassment, had become a symbol of transformation. New recruits heard the story, not as a cautionary tale of disrespect, but as a demonstration of potential, growth, and mentorship. Marines repeated the story, emphasizing Alex's calm authority, her patience, and the lessons learned by Briggs. It was no longer just about a shove. It was about how one person's presence and guidance could inspire change, foster respect, and cultivate leadership in others. Alex, observing quietly from her office, reflected on the broader implications. Leadership was not about fear, rank, or authority alone. It was about seeing potential, providing guidance, and allowing lessons to unfold through experience. She had turned a seemingly trivial incident into an opportunity for profound growth, and the results were evident across the base. Marines moved differently, thought differently, and approached challenges differently. Her influence had become a living, breathing culture of awareness and discipline. Briggs, aware of the responsibility he now carried, embraced his role with humility and dedication. He trained junior Marines, shared insights, and guided exercises with calm authority. Each interaction reinforced his understanding of leadership, ensuring that Alex's lessons were not forgotten. He had learned that true strength lay not in dominance or ego, but in observation, discipline, and the ability to guide others effectively. The ripple effect continued. Marines who had once doubted themselves or their leaders now saw examples of capability, mentorship, and transformation in action. Alex's philosophy spread quietly but profoundly, influencing behavior, decisions, and the very culture of the unit. Respect, discipline, and awareness became the norm, not the exception. A simple shove in the mess hall had evolved into a foundational story, illustrating the power of mentorship, leadership, and the subtle but undeniable influence of presence. In the final scene of this transformation, the base held a joint exercise involving multiple units. Briggs led his squad with confidence, applying every lesson he had learned from Alex. The exercise was flawless, not because it was easy, but because leadership, discipline, and composure had been ingrained in every decision, every movement, and every instruction. Alex observed from a distance, satisfied that the lessons she had imparted were not only understood but lived, applied, and carried forward. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the base, Marines moved with purpose, awareness, and respect. The story of Alex Hale and the shove in the mess hall had become more than an anecdote. It was a legacy. A single act, handled with patience, discipline, and insight, had transformed a young Marine, influenced peers, and left an enduring mark on the culture of the unit. Briggs, standing at the center of the training field, glanced toward Alex. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment no words were needed. Respect, understanding, and gratitude flowed silently between them. He had been transformed by her mentorship, and in turn, he was shaping the next generation of Marines. Alex Hale's legacy was clear. True leadership inspired, mentored, and guided. It left an imprint that extended far beyond rank, medals, or authority. It was measured not by orders obeyed, but by the growth, discipline, and transformation it inspired in others. The shove in the mess hall had become a story of redemption, growth, and enduring impact. A story that would be told and retold, shaping Marines for years to come. As darkness settled over the base, a quiet sense of accomplishment filled the air. The lesson had been learned, the leadership applied, and the ripple of influence ensured that the story of Captain Alexandra Hale and PFC Rowan Briggs would resonate far beyond the boundaries of that morning in the mess hall. Discipline, respect, mentorship, and transformation had triumphed, leaving a lasting legacy that would inspire generations of Marines to come.